When I was running D2C, my average revenue per employee was at least $2 million, right? 2 to 3 million bucks.
Welcome to Build a Business Worth Buying, the podcast where seasoned entrepreneurs, M&A experts, and world-class operators share behind-the-scenes stories of building, scaling, and selling remarkable businesses. I'm your host, Aaron Allpeter, and every week I sit down with people shaping the world of acquisitions, founders who've cashed out, buyers with bold strategies, and advisors who help make deals happen. This is not a podcast for beginners. It's for those who know the grind and want actionable insights to make their next big move. Get ready to take notes, rethink your strategy, and hear untold stories of what it takes to build a business worth buying. We have a fantastic episode today. Today's guest is Adi Gulia. He's one of the most respected e-commerce founders to come out of the Canadian startup ecosystem. Adi has had lots of different ventures, but he's best known as the founder of Grace and Stella, a beauty and skincare brand that he built from the ground up. What started out as a scrappy product test turned into a globally distributed e-commerce business, spanning Amazon, D2C, and major retail partnerships, and ultimately led to a successful private equity exit. Since his exit, Adi has shifted into purely building brands to buying and operating businesses himself, which gives him a really rare perspective to be on both sides of the table. I first met Adi at E-commerce North, which is one of the best communities out there for the Canadian startup ecosystem, as well as a conference. He's the founder of E-commerce North. He's done so much there. And so just a really great human being, really great story. And I think you're going to love this episode. Before we get into it, if you are a fan of Build a Business Worth Buying, would love to have you like and subscribe and share this episode with a friend. I think there's so much going on, and I love meeting you guys in person. With that, let's get in with Adi. Thank you so much for being on. I have really been looking forward to this one.
Hey, good to be here, man.
Great. So I want to start by diving into your earliest days at Grace and Stella. Oftentimes when people are starting a project, they're not quite sure, is this real? Is this just a hobby? What were some of the signals for you that this could be something more than just a side project?
It was really when I started to see the demand of what I had. And when the demand outweighs the supply, that's when you know you've got something real. And when stuff's flying off the shelf, there's no question around whether what you have is worthy of being on the market. That's when I knew I had something.
That's great. Was it simply just that you sold out, or was it that it was several magnitudes larger than even your high side expectations?
Both. I mean, we sold out first, and then I restocked. This started as like a side passion project, which I'd always just been interested in business, and so I was experimenting with a different form of business that seemed to be evolving around that time. I'd met somebody who said, "Hey, I built an Amazon business," and I wasn't aware that people sell their product on Amazon. At that time, I thought Amazon sells everything on Amazon because I didn't shop much on Amazon, so wasn't quite aware of the phenomenon. So I had a chat with him, and then I thought, okay, I already had a beauty business prior to that, so I thought, okay, why not come up with a new beauty product and put it on this marketplace and see what happens. And going out of stock was definitely a surprise, but it was not an accident. It was definitely orchestrated. There was some engineering behind the scenes from a marketing point of view, which had I not done it, I wouldn't have sold a single unit. That would be sheer luck. But for me, I'd done my homework. I'd sort of learned a little bit about how to get a product launched. And when it sold out, it was a pleasant surprise, but it was not a confirmation that I have a home run here. And so when we reordered for the second batch, that sold out fairly quickly also. Third batch came, same thing happened. That's when I knew this is not a fluke. And then that's when I thought maybe this is something to take more seriously. And from there, we just ordered a second product, third product, fourth product, and each product became an experiment on its own. Some products worked, some didn't, but it's all a matter of trial and error and experimentation.
What was the time period between kind of when you first launched to when you're like, okay, this needs to now be my main focus?
From the point that I launched until around 7 or 8 months in, when I was just pulling in $100,000 a month. And that's the point at which I thought, okay, like I should take it more seriously. Yeah, because even if it drops from here, it's dropping to like 50K a month, right? It's not going to go to zero because there was some legs the business had at that point. And then that's when I decided I'm going to start diversifying into other product categories. The thing with D2C businesses is ordering cycle is quite long. You can't ship a product out as fast as you have the idea of it, right? So if you have the idea of a product, you got to first come up with packaging, design, formulation, work with the esthetician. That could take a month. And then you got to have the right manufacturer, which if you have that in place, production can take up to a month, and then shipping can take up to a month. So you're looking at a quarter of a lag. You can shrink that down by air shipping it, but there's some constraints around that. It eats into your margins. So you want to start with something, or at least I did. And this wasn't something I had really thought about. It sort of got lucky with it, was small and light. If you have something small and light, the difference between shipping it by air and by sea is not as much of a deal breaker, especially if you got good margins. So I would just airship. And instead of a 3 or 4 month wait period, which is what most businesses have to deal with, I was iterating much more quickly, which I think is the real problem, is like the speed to signal is critical. Because of that, I was able to just like order more frequently, test more frequently, test more different variations of the same product to see what the customer likes or doesn't like. By the time we had our third order, I was 5 or 6 months in. And then, around the 8 month mark, I had my second product in. I'd say somewhere between the 6 to 8 month mark was when it became like solidified. Okay, there's something here.
Yeah, I mean, 100K a month, that's the stuff that dreams are made of. I think everybody wishes that they could maybe get there and be there in 7 or 8 months. So you talked about the engineering that you did ahead of time in order to make sure that it was successful. Can you talk a little bit about what you did, and maybe from your first business that you brought into this one, saying, hey, this is what actually made a difference? And I imagine it's not one of those things where you spent $1 million to make $100,000. You probably were profitable and growing and doing all those sorts of things from day one, right?
Yeah, I've always been very scrappy. There's just no room for waste or leaks. That's just sort of been in my DNA as a founder. I've never raised a dollar of funding from anybody else. And so I just watch very carefully operations, margins, things like that. It's not that I got lucky, but I did try to plant my luck in some ways. So what I mean is the engineering that I did was, you could call it the hard work, right? And there's no shortage of hard work. Like every founder or somebody that wants to be a founder is working hard. But that's not where outsized results come from. Where I've seen outsized results come from is not how hard you're rowing the boat, but what boat you're on, right?
Mm.
And so the finance engineering in the background was something that I had to do, and that was the actual rowing and the mechanics of trying to figure out, how do you rank, how do you sell, how do you get distribution, how do you market, right? But the bigger piece of the puzzle was being in the right category, in the right marketplace, in the right business, right? If you pick the wrong business to be in, it's like being on an incline on a treadmill. You just can't run as fast. And I had a lot of other things going for me, in the sense that there was a lot of tailwinds, right? When the wind is behind your back, it just makes everything flow a lot smoother. And so margins were great. Demand exceeded supply by like orders of magnitude, because there just wasn't as many brands that were aware of the immense demand from customers who wanted to buy on Amazon, and not enough brands had come on to realize that. So that I had going for me, and some of that you could call luck. Some of that was actually just talking to people and realizing, okay, like to get a customer on Facebook, you gotta spend $30. To get a customer on Google, you gotta spend $60. To get a customer on Amazon, you gotta spend $5. So there was something that seemed like the tailwinds were in this direction. So let's look here. And as far as the actual engineering, that was really just being maniacal around what works, just what is working, right? And no fluff, just what is going to rank my product. If I want my product seen by somebody, what do I need to do? And let me go figure out who has already done that. Because if I'm going to go on YouTube and I search for whatever everybody else is searching for, then I don't really have a delta between the average knowledge and, sort of like the elite knowledge. So started making friends with a bunch of people that already were ahead of me by miles. And with the way they would explain certain things, that was, I think, a critical piece of it. It was being with the right group of people. And then the actual technical things around it, were things like having a minimum ratio of review to sales, right? Like, so if you want to have X in sales, you got to have Y in reviews. This was just like a basic formulaic thing that I knew I had to get right. And that has evolved over time. Like, you used to need 20 reviews to get your first sale. Now you need 200 reviews to get your first sale. And someday you're going to need 2,000. And when you need 2,000, you might as well not start that game because it's too expensive to play. So those were sort of the engineering behind it, right? And then there was things that I could do to like rank my way to the top by manipulating the algorithm. So like, what is the algorithm? What does the algorithm reward? What does it punish? And there was a whole bunch of things that went into that. Really, a lot of just like diligently talking to founders, seeing what's working for them, and studying it like you would say in school if you had to pass an exam. And so that was sort of like the engineering piece of it.
Okay. That's all very helpful. I mean, it's also possible to over-engineer a solution and make things more complicated because they may eventually be, a billion-dollar idea. Is there anything that you did that you said, I'm intentionally going to keep this simple? I'm intentionally going to try to keep this as basic as possible because I need to prove out a different thesis right now.
If you're having to rely on engineering, then you just haven't picked the right boat.
How many
So
different
that's what I
boats
was.
did you try?
It was the first boat, just got in the right boat.
Yeah.
Because the problem with getting in the wrong boat is you waste a lot of time, right? Like, especially if you're in a business where you got to deal with inventory and physical stuff. You got inventory now. If it's a dud, you got to figure out how to liquidate it. And that whole thing just wastes a lot of time. You don't have a lot of room for error on the boat itself, right? Because a lot of times, I saw people that had sunk a fair bit of money into buying 5,000 units of a product, wasn't working. They started to work with a different agency to see if they could crack the code. And then they started to hire somebody else to see if they could crack the code. And the problem wasn't the talent of the agency or the person they brought on. The problem was you just didn't pick the right product. And that's where 90% of the magic lies. Actually, I should clarify myself. That was actually my second boat. I had a product that I had picked prior to that didn't go as well, and I just forgot about it. It was this product that I came across when I went to China, and I was at this show called Canton Fair, which is like a amazing show that happens every year in Guangzhou. And there was this crowd around this one guy who was sitting on a chair, and one of the guys had set him down, and he had hair loss, like his hair was thinning. And within 30 seconds, he gave him like a full head of hair. And this was magical to me because my family members have struggled with hair loss, obviously. So I was like, this is an interesting product that I myself might consider at some point. So I took it and then I brought it here, but that one didn't go as well, and I was very quick to just like pivot to a different one. So I should clarify that was actually my second boat that worked out.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Being in the right boat, having the right problem that you're solving for is 90% of the issue. And what advice do you have for people who have these ideas? And I'm sure you talk to founders all the time who are like, hey, I want to do this thing. You're like, well, I don't know if that's the right boat from my perspective. What's the framework that you would share to help people evaluate if the idea is good or not?
Yeah, I think this one of the biggest challenges is self-honesty with how much you want, what you say you want. And usually what happens is the person that makes it to the top genuinely wants what they say they want. And the rest of the ones who sort of went to the bottom of Mount Everest and stopped somewhere in the middle or didn't start the journey or, decided to come back, usually they just didn't want it as much as the one that made it, so to speak, right? It's about how you feel about the idea. Every idea has a maker behind it that will take it to the top, right? Every idea has that potential. I love this one European saying where there's a top for every pot. If you're the top for that one pot, where you genuinely can't stop thinking about making this one thing work, trying to figure it out, not from an outcome point of view, like with the door prize that I'll get at the end of this journey or the exit or the money or whatever, but if it's more about the joy of just figuring it out, like this is really fascinating to me, almost like a kid, right? Like when you see little children play with a spoon and a plate, for them in that moment, it's just all that exists in that moment, and they could play with that spoon and that plate for hours. And that magic goes away when we become adults, right? We sort of lose that honesty and we start doing things for an ulterior motive, whether that's money, status, whatever the case might be. So honestly examining if the thing that you're pursuing is what floats your boat, that would be the first step. Once you get past that major hurdle, which I think a lot of people just don't get past, they prematurely jump to the idea. But then as far as like validating whether the idea is good or not, I think speed to the degree to which you can quickly identify whether this product is worthy of somebody else's credit card being swiped at the grocery chain or on the Amazon account or on your website is the speed with which you will basically figure out whether the product ought to exist. And so a lot of people get caught up in overthinking, right? Or over analyzing or over optimizing for things that really don't matter. It just gives them the illusion that they're busy with the process rather than the outcome, right? As quickly as you can validate whether somebody wants what you have and the speed with which you can continuously test against that and almost detach yourself as a third party, right? Because if you have a lot vested into it, you might cloud your own judgment to want to believe that this is going to work when there may be opposing feedback to that belief and you may not see the truth. So I think it's really important to go in as an experiment almost to see, okay, this is the product and this is the market. Let me bounce them against each other, see whether it's, again, like clicking or not. If it's not, I got to pivot something. Lack of that detachment is what prevents the speed of experimentation, right? So you sort of have to play this this game with your own mind to like make sure that you're not getting caught up with the day-to-day grind that will eventually kick in and kick your ass if you're not watchful. And so I'd say like the speed to signal, talking to customers, talking to the actual user, there's nothing like that, right? Because at the end of the day, they will give you the brutal truth around whether they like something or they don't, whether something's resonating or not. And again, the degree to which you're attached to that outcome is going to be the degree to which you're going to be slowed down. So like really just like being out there on the field, talking to customers. If you just got those two things right, you're like 90% of the way there.
Yeah. I love like the idea of talking to your customers, you treating it as an experiment. That all makes sense. I think one of the hardest things that any potential founder will look at is when to kill an idea. And so maybe you can talk about that, like with the hair loss idea. How invested were you in this? Did you have to have like some distance and nonchalant of like, hey, yeah, if this doesn't work out, it's fine, and I put a couple $1,000 in, and that's not a big deal, or is it something that you wanted to will into existence? Because I've always felt that there's two types of founder stories out there. There's the one that that was lightning in a bottle, it was overnight success, and we hear about those, and then we hear about the ones where man, John Foley Peloton mortgaged his house, was struggling for years and years before it took off. And you hear about those stories too. But the ones that you don't hear about are the stories where the founder should have quit years ago, right? And they're just hanging on. They're probably not capitalized. They're probably not in a position where they can get to a point where it's actually going to be meaningful. What advice do you have for people who are maybe in that position where it's like, man, yeah, you had a good idea, but the execution wasn't there, the funding wasn't there, and this isn't going to work?
Yeah, there's like a lot in that, right? And I guess the second type that you described, where they just go all in, right? There's no such thing as failure. For that guy, there is no such thing as failure because it's done before it's done. He has no option. The reason he has no option is because there's no reason for it. That's just what it is for him, right? Whereas for the person that it is an option, where failure could be an optionality, you can't compare those two guys, right? This comes back to, do you honestly want something, right? Because if you honestly want something, then failure just is not an option, right? I just don't think failure really is an option. It's all about experimentation. Some experiments work, some don't. Your runway is extended far, far, far beyond most people if you don't have that option to quit. But for the person that is sort of looking at it as just like a means to an end, like this is an experimentation on building wealth, creating cash flow, generating income, right? When do you know whether to kill an idea or not? It is a tough question, right? Because if you're purely doing it for financial reasons, and if it's not working, you have to throw the towel in at some point because you're now losing money and time. And so where do you draw that distinction? And that's for a person to answer for themselves. But for me, I didn't feel like I really threw the towel in because I launched my second product as I was figuring out the first one, right?
Mhm.
So for me, again, the product was not the end all be all. It was one of many experiments that I knew I was going to run over the course of however long I was in that business, in that game. So to me, it didn't feel like I quit because it was just, okay, this is one strike at the dart, didn't land on the bullseye. Let's go with the second one. If that hadn't landed, I would have gone for the third and the fourth. And so in some ways, that is also similar to the second scenario, where if you know that eventually after throwing enough darts, you're going to land the bullseye, you're not going to move away from that dart. You're going to keep throwing because you just know that it's a matter of experimentation. And so in some ways, yes, I did quit it because the product was not doing as well, right? I don't remember exactly what it was doing. It got like tens of thousands of dollars in sales or something. But it was not Amazon is a very demand focused platform where people know what they're going to search for, right? It's not an interruption based platform as much as, say, Instagram or Facebook. So that product, people just didn't know about it at that time. So they weren't searching for it. For me to even show up on their results through sponsored ads was very expensive because I was competing against other products that people were searching for, and their cost of acquisition was much lower because mine had a lot of educational component around it and all these things. So yeah, long story short, like I think you never quit, you never throw the towel in. From an outsider's perspective, it may be appearing like, oh, he threw the towel in, but that's a battle lost. That's not the war that was lost. It's the journey. What is your vision? Like you want to make something happen, and there's going to be some things that are flops along the way, but it's all an experimentation. It's just all a big experimentation, right?
Yeah, I that definitely resonates with me. If you make a mistake or you lose money, you've got to decide if that's just going to be a loss or if it's tuition that you're paying to learn something. And it sounds like that's really goes into this idea of this experimentation you're doing, where you're learning along the way. And it wasn't that the first option was a bad idea; it's just that option number two was a better boat to be in. And so I think that there's a way of looking at this and saying, okay, if I were to pay somebody and to be able to walk away with this experience and understanding, what would I be willing to pay for that? Maybe a different way to look at it. And so if you're like, hey, I'd gladly pay $10,000 to be an expert at Amazon sales and things like that. Like, okay, well, great. That's probably how much you're willing to lose over a period of time. Net any revenue or stuff you have coming in.
You're sort of here for a limited period of time, right? Like as a founder, your career is like what, 50 years at max, 60 years if you're lucky. That's not a long time, particularly when you're younger, right? When you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, like those periods are very, very critical. And so the thing that you want to really maximize for is your time, right? Like not to be wasting it rather than the money or the cash, because that will always come. Right? There's no shortage of money. They print it every day. Your time can't be printed. I'd really try to maximize for the time and the speed with which you're just running these experiments.
Yeah. Let's go back to Grace and Stella because you've talked about how after 7 8 months you're like, okay, I think I have something or I need to work on it. I'm assuming that your growth wasn't a perfect straight line with nothing else that went wrong. At what point did you get to a moment where the growth actually became either an operational risk or a financial risk?
I wouldn't say I ever ran into a point where I felt it became an operational risk or a financial risk because I've always ran every company that I've been involved in very lean. When I was running D2C, my average revenue per employee was at least $2 million, right? 2 to 3 million bucks. And so I was just very like surgical around how lean I wanted to keep it because I didn't want to have disaster strike and me not be prepared. And really what is your biggest armor is your margins, right? Like that's your real army. Like when there's a threat from the outside, whether it's competitors, marketplace, whatever, your army is your margins. And so the degree to which your army is healthy is the degree to which you're going to be able to fight that battle when the shit hits the fan. So I wouldn't say like there was any moment where I felt that until I placed like really big bets and there were things that went sideways there. But I would say there was definitely challenges around team and building a team. because when you go from a solo operator, and this is one of the things that's so exciting about AI is because you can now theoretically, if you have an army of agents, just have your own will with these agents, right? But when you have people to manage, every person has their own incentives, their own goals, priorities, and as you're scaling the business, your DNA sort of starts to dilute a little bit unless you're exceptional at hunting talent and cultivating that talent, which I made mistakes with early on. So I think the biggest quote risk was really, how do you continue to scale with the people that you're bringing on, right? How do you have it so that the culture is such that they want to carry that same momentum? Because if they don't, then you're having to fix the leakage that comes with that. Scaling with people, because at that point it becomes more of a product game and a people game, because now you're getting the people to launch the products and the people to market it and the people to go out and learn as much as they can. That was a challenging piece. How do you have the right team in place to be able to take this ship to the next milestone? And then financially, there was always the issue, especially with these D2C brands, right, where your cash flow is just tied up. You got to order inventory, you got to run ads, you got to be as aggressive as you can, because seeing cash sitting there is like your army sitting idle, send them out to battle, right? So there's always just this problem of, as you grow, so do your problems. But that's just the nature of that beast, and that's one of the reasons why I left that industry, was didn't want to play that game anymore.
Yeah. One of the things I appreciate about you is you've been very open and vocal over the years of just setbacks that you've had along your founder journey, just in all the things that you've done. Are there any particular moments that you look back to now that you're like, you know what, I'm glad that I went through that because it taught me something that's vital for my next venture?
There's plenty of those things where I feel like I made mistakes or was a bit reckless or didn't calibrate the risk or just felt invincible and wound up getting knocked out. But that's just part of calibrating your own self and your confidence and knowing when to go full throttle and when to pull back. I'd say the two biggest ones for me were problems in partnerships and growing too fast and not being able to manage that growth adequately. Early in my career, I let emotions get in the way of effective decision making. If you're prioritizing feelings over what is rational, there's big problems with that, and oftentimes it's done in order to say not hurt the other person, right? But what you're really trying to do is to not hurt yourself, because if you were to quote hurt the other person, it's about how you would feel if they were hurt, right? So it's a very selfish way of going about things, even if you're thinking that you're doing something for the other person's benefit. And having tough conversations as fast as you can is probably one of the biggest things. I don't think there's any founder who doesn't have to have that at some point, right? Whether it's with an employee, whether it's with your lender, whether it's with your co-founder or with your partner, delaying that is a very big problem and a big mistake. And sooner you can nip it in the bud, the better. I just didn't have the balls to do it at that time. And I've learned you got to have balls, because if you don't, you're just hammering your own balls. It's going to be painful. And so you just, that's a learning process. You just got to come to the awareness that you're doing harm to yourself by not, because, by not doing it, you're basically trying to protect yourself, but you're not protecting yourself, right? And so if you have somebody who's not performing well, it's like that old saying, hire slowly, fire quickly. And there's a lot of truth to that. The other is, a friendship founded on a business is better than a business founded on a friendship. It's not for everybody, but that's just how I strongly feel, because you can't have a blurry line when you're doing business. You got to have a black and white. It's business or it's friendship, right? What is it? And I'm seeing this right now, right? I'm involved in some ventures where I'm having conversations with the partners or friends who are running into these partnership problems, and it's never pleasant. And a lot of times it's because they're also friends, and it makes it that much more difficult. So that's the first one. And the second one I would say is if you're growing too fast. And that happened to me, where we basically were doubled every year, and then an opportunity came for us to continue to double. But if you're doubling every year, it's goes like that, and it's a very exhilarating process. It's like what you live for as a founder. Like there's nothing more beautiful than that. Like, the adrenaline, the desire to go crush, right? Like that's why you get up in the morning. But that's a very tumultuous thing, right? Like that comes with a lot of pitfalls if not managed properly. There was one scenario in which I just took on way too much debt, and I did a pretty good job on selling everybody on why they should give me debt, and they were sold because I was sold. When that project that I was involved in just went south, I was left hanging with the debt with like personal guarantee on like tens of millions of dollars, and that was not fun. That was not a fun period. And a couple of things I learned is like be very careful with personally guaranteeing anything. Don't. It's like I forget the Warren Buffett saying, but it's like if you're risking something that you need in order to get something you want, be careful, because can you really afford to lose this thing that you need? Greed, I guess, right? Like there was a lot of greed involved in growing businesses, right? Like you want to grow the business, and that's like the greedy part of the human nature. It's like, I want to take this thing to the moon. But calibrate that greed, right? Don't get overly greedy, because you're going to hurt people along the way. You're going to hurt yourself along the way. It's no fun losing even the bank's money, right? But luckily navigated that. That was a whole different thing. And that's the kind of education that school can never give you, Like you can't go to a 4-year degree for that. And all these things are sort of just amazing life experiences to me, where it's just like, how lucky am I to have that gotten under my belt while I was younger, rather than when I am, down the line. Because now I can sort of look in my rear view mirror and look at that thing that happened back then.
Well, you not only get to look in your rear view mirror, but you also have plenty of road ahead of you. So that's the benefit of a multi-team founder.
Yeah.
All right, so let's kind of keep walking through the Grace and Sell stories. So you are growing, you're doing well. At what point did you start to think about, hey, this is something that somebody else may want to buy? Was that always the plan one day? Or was there a moment where you're like, hey, actually, I think that this could be something that I exit?
Exit was always in the back of my head. I just couldn't see myself selling beauty products and promoting a beauty company forever, right? Like that was never part of the deal that I made with myself. So exit was definitely one of the intended outcomes. I just didn't know when it would happen. As I was building it, it was never preoccupying me. It was just year in, year out, trying to build the best business I could, make it as great as I could, make the products as great as I could. Because at the end of the day, the exit will be a byproduct of that, right? You can't chase the exit. Let the exit be a byproduct of building something. And then,
was there a moment where it changed in your mind where you said, okay, I'm now ready to actually pursue this? So I guess talk about how the exit happened. Were you not planning on it and then someone sent you a cold email and you said, okay, sure, I'll listen? Or had you gotten to the point yourself where you're like, I've taken this about as far as I think I can go, or maybe I'm tired and I'm ready for a change?
Yeah. So I mean, it was a cold email. I would receive cold emails every week. There'd be like 3 or 4 bankers or brokers or M&A advisors who would email, and I had like a folder in my inbox where I would just put it in like broker, and I just threw them all in there for the day that I might be interested. I'll like reach out type of thing. And the broker that eventually ended up helping me out was the one who had emailed me actually 6 years prior to the deal happening. So
follow up works is what you're saying.
100%, because that's more of an enterprise business, right? Where you're dealing with businesses and a high touch business. So it definitely works. My kid asked me one day, "What do you do for work?" That's when I was like, okay, my son's starting to like take interest in what I do at work. And then for some reason I started to think about what my work is like. What am I actually like? This is what I've taken on as my full-time project, where I go and spend 50, 60, 80 hours a week. And when I sort of like zoomed out, I just didn't see it as a delightful future where I was still running that brand, because I never was passionate about the D2C space or the beauty space. I was passionate about building a business, but when I realized like I have this great passion for building business, but it hasn't quite intersected with the kind of business I would want to build. It started to like circulate in my head that, hey, like, why are you still doing it then, right? Why not, like, do you have that much time to waste, sort of thing? And so that's when I, sent back an email to a few of the brokers, said, hey, show me what you got. Like, Not saying I want to sell today, but interested to see what might be on the market. And then they just started to bring me these groups that were very interested in the brand, and that started the process. And that was this whole journey that took a while. It was really like more so personal reasons that I've done well with this brand. I've had a lot of fun building it. I think I should try new things, right? Like similar to how each product was a different experimentation under that business. The idea that each business could be a different experimentation of its own was very interesting to me. And so, that's what really ultimately led to exiting.
Yeah. When you were going through the exit process, what were the sorts of things that the potential acquirers were most interested in that you were like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Of course, they're going to care about EBIT and growth rate and stuff like that. And what were some of the things that were surprising that they cared about?
There was a lot of interest for the brand. Because we had done a good job of building it into something that it started as an Amazon brand, right? Like where we were primarily on Amazon, but it ventured off into different distribution channels. We had our own direct to consumer. We had partnerships with different retailers. We worked with a whole bunch of different these subscription boxes. And so it's well diversified. And there was a very unique story, which they weren't hearing from a lot of these other brands, because not having all your eggs in one basket is a very rare thing for D2C brands, right? Like most brands that tend to scale on Facebook, say, if Facebook was taken away, there'd be a fraction. There'd be like a shell of their original self. And so for us, we had fortunately overcome that over the course of the previous few years. So I think that frame of going in with, you want to buy this more than I want to sell this, is a very important hat to wear, because otherwise you just make bad decisions. It was quite an easy process from that point of view, because we just knew we had a very solid brand that we built. It wasn't so much of a surprise, because I knew I should have had that put together earlier, but just cleaning up the financials, cleaning up the books, cleaning up and having that be ready for a buyer. Because I'm a solo founder here and I own the whole thing. I don't have an investor to report to. I can do whatever I want, right? Like, it's like, I don't care if it's clean one month, and I don't care if, it's just like, I'm focused on building. All this other stuff is not that interesting. And that was a very tedious process of like going back, talking to the banker, talking to the buyer, and figuring out what the hell ad backs are, what not to add back. All that stuff was just like crazy. So that was what surprised me, was how unprepared from that point I was. And but that, if you get a good accountant involved, they can help you clean that up fairly quickly. The other thing that surprised me was how much more somebody who wants to buy a business is interested in buying it than you as a seller are interested in selling it. You oftentimes people forget it, that somebody who's in a position to buy a business is a lot more desperate, because they have capital that is not being put to use, and they may have sponsors who may have given them the capital to get a return on their money, and each month that passes that they haven't closed a deal, or each year that passes that they haven't hit their metrics, is a bad sign for them. They want this way more than you want them, right? And that allows you to negotiate much better. It allows you to like remain much more calm and not be under the fear that I might lose something, right?
What was it about the final offer or deal where you're like, man, like this is life changing? I would be a fool to say no now, because the option's always to keep doing what you're doing and then come back and maybe do this a couple years later for hopefully more money. But what was it that kind of lets you know that the time was right, the acquirer was right, the deal was right, and it was worth doing?
There was a lot of great offers, a lot of different groups that we were talking to. But the thing that made us most comfortable was we just felt that the team that we were talking to was the right next home for the brand. We just thought that their direction that they wanted to take it in was the most concrete, the most well thought out. Last thing you want is to build something, sell it to somebody who just like takes it into the ground or doesn't take care of it, because in a lot of ways it's your baby that you're putting up for adoption, right? And you still want to see that baby go and have a great life after you. So that was the main factor, is will they, are they more capable of taking this to greater heights than we are? And if that was, I guess, the first one. And then obviously there was like the financial side of things, where Are we structuring it the right way? Does it seem fair? Is there earnout involved? Are there people that are going to stay on the team? Who on the team wants to stay? Who doesn't? Like all those factors, and seeing how honest they are around who they want to keep, who they don't. Because if somebody's just, you can often tell when somebody trying to close a deal is telling you, yeah, we want to keep everybody, which may not often be the case because they may already have their own team to do certain things, which, from like a efficiency standpoint, it's always a good thing to try to make a deal with somebody where you would want to make another deal with them down the road. That was sort of like the deciding factor for us.
Yeah, that's great. So since the exit, you've moved into the other side. You're now looking at companies, you're acquiring your operating business yourself. What have you learned or understood from your experience selling a business that is really important for you as an acquirer?
I think the fundamentals are the same. Where is it a business that customers love, and the degree to which customers are going to be unwilling to change the business if the business wasn't around, is somebody hurting, right? And the degree to which that can be verified, like some people call it a moat, right? Like what's your moat? And to me, moat is not about defensibility as much as it's about, do you really have something that's worthy of existing on the marketplace? We look for those sort of elements where, in like a capital intensive industry, your capital is your moat, right? If you're building steel plants, it's expensive to build a steel plant. So like nobody's going to just come in and like erect one up unless they also have the capital. So that's their moat. In like a technology company, it's really the ideas, so the people are the moat, right? Where the degree to which you have like this 10x engineer is the degree to which you're going to have a moat around how well and quickly you can scale that product. And then for something like D2C, I think it's a different kind of it's not really a moat. It's like an intangible bond that the customer has with your brand. Like, do they resonate with your brand where it's the only thing that they want to try? Like, they love it. It's like an emotional connection to the product or the brand, or it becomes part of their identity, right? So for I guess for every business, there's going to be a different set of things that make that business tick. The ones we're looking for is one, are the customers truly finding value with this in whatever way that they may define value? And the other thing I look for is a lot of times founders try to make the business as big as they can before they sell it, right? I think looking at it from how do I make it as lean as possible, right? Even if the numbers shrink on the top a little bit, but operationally, the risk profile has been reduced a lot. Because when you're trying to make it big, you're also scaring an investor or an acquirer, because now there's a lot of chubbiness around the operations. Whereas if you've trimmed it for them, if they know that you've reduced the risk, right? So I think that's a critical aspect of it. Is like you're thinking about maximizing the exit price, but they're thinking about, am I gonna lose my shirt when I buy this thing? And so rather than showing them ceiling, show them the floor, right? Like how low could this fall if you took it and it didn't go as well, right? Rather than this is where it's going to go, to the moon, right? Which everybody does. So you want to do that, but you also want to show the foundation that is in place as far as a founder, for example, how reliant is the business on the founder, right? Because that's always a high risk profile. It doesn't matter what the founder is telling you just got to watch why the business is doing well, who's doing what. Interview the people there if you can, right? Like if you may not interview everybody, but you got to interview the people that the founder is telling you is leading charge. Because if the founder is leading charge, then you know you have a problem. Because then the founder has to be made an employee, which creates his own set of problems. But if the founder is telling you that I've already created the system, then you got to verify that system. So I think avoiding situations as glowy as they may seem, where it's highly dependent on one person, or that would be something that I would avoid. And then other than that, I'm just like agnostic to what kind of business. It's been like, we looked at like all kinds of businesses.
Yeah. That's great. And I know we're coming up on time here. We've got one question we always like to ask our guests on Build a Business Worth Buying, and you actually teed it up perfectly. And it is, what's the best example of a moat you've seen a business build?
To me, it would be Apple. Like I just switched after, I think, 12 years from Apple to Pixel. And my wife was upset with me. That's a moat. Steve Jobs has been gone for 15 years, but the foundation and the ecosystem that he laid down, it's still bearing fruit. He's made it idiot proof in so many ways, right? Like the consumer just loves it. The experience of being able to be on their Mac and not needing to pick up their phone to like text their partner, right? And being able to like locate their devices wherever if they lose it or through their Find My thing. And it's all just so well synchronized, right?
That's a great example. We hear them over and over again. I guess there's a reason they're the most valuable company in the world.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah.
Ani, this has been very enlightening. I thank you so much for sharing your experience, your wisdom. I know I learned a lot. I know our listeners are certainly learned a lot as well.
Thanks for joining me on Build a Business Worth Buying, brought to you by ISBA Consulting. I hope today's conversation gave you real insights into scaling smarter, selling better, and thinking like a strategic operator. If you found value in this episode, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's building their own sellable business. Until next time, remember, the real win isn't just building a business, it's building one worth buying.